Alright, y'all. So I just did my previous video. This is part 3 on the Mississippi Territory and Mississippi history. Um, Last couple videos I did, Yazoo land scandal and the forming of the Mississippi Territory. I'm going to do one on the Mobile District of the Republic of West Florida, which covers the area of the state that I am actually in, which I am down here close to Pascagoula, Mississippi. I'm in the extreme southeast corner of the state, and this area, at the time of the Mississippi Territory being formed in 1798, was still controlled by the Spanish. Well, in 1810, this area didn't know what to be called. This area was actually from the Gulf of Mexico up to the 31st parallel, and going from the Perdido River, which is the present day border of Alabama and Florida, going from the Perdido River to the Mississippi River at Baton Rouge, including the Florida parishes of Louisiana. This area was known as the Mobile District. The Mobile District also briefly became its own country in 1810. It was called the Republic of West Florida. I think it only lasted about 45 days before the U.S. actually took it. There were still some tensions between the U.S. and England. Of course, we fought them in the Revolutionary War, and you know they were still England was still a force to be reckoned with. Well, Spain has always been an ally of England, and being that Spain owned Florida, Florida at the time extended throughout the entire present day state of Florida, the Mobile District, the Florida parishes of Louisiana, to include the city of New Orleans and areas south of Lake Pontchartrain. Knowing that it extended that far and it was all Spanish controlled, the U.S. saw it as a threat. Well, in 1810, Reuben Kemper led a small force to try to take this area by force. It didn't work. However, Spain was getting weaker. Spain was losing a lot of steam. Now, 300 years before this, in the 1500s, of course, Spain was Europe's only superpower at that point, and they owned everything. They owned all of this, all the way down to South America, all your Caribbean islands, and then, of course, everybody else got involved and said, well, you know what, I'm just going to take it. Well, this was a time when Spain was, they were kind of going through some stuff. So they didn't have the strength that they had in previous centuries. Not to mention that this area down here was mainly lawless. You really didn't need, people lived down here in peaceful anarchy. Spain couldn't really control them because they didn't have the military might. I mean, they could barely control Florida, which was a desolate wilderness back then. It's not the Florida that we know today. I mean, certainly, you know, Orlando wasn't a major metropolitan area. It didn't even exist. Neither did Miami or Jacksonville or anything else. They had Pensacola and they had St. Augustine. And then, of course, they had Mobile. And the Spanish also was trying to hang on to New Orleans. And they were trying to wrestle it and keep it from the French. Well, obviously in 1810, the Louisiana Purchase happening in 1803, this area, to include New Orleans, was still a disputed area between the United States and Spain. And we were really close to going to war with Spain, but we never really did. We just kind of took over. Well, back then in this area, and I've read this in several different accounts, there were agents of the U.S. that came to what is now known as or what was known as the Mobile district. They came to establish colonies such as Biloxi. They realized that these people were largely uneducated. There was no crime to speak of. What little crime they had, they handled it. They didn't really care who was over it. This area had 3 or 4 different governments try to claim it, and they didn't care for none of them. They were happily doing their own thing. So it was really easy to convince the people that, okay, now this is the United States, and now you are in the Mississippi Territory. You're one of us. And that's what happened. Of course, in 1812, Louisiana became a state. And then that cut down the Mississippi Territory in the Mobile District basically from the West Pearl River, which is the current border of Mississippi and Louisiana, um, this part of the state anyway, all the way to the Perdido River, which is the present border of Alabama and Florida. Keep in mind, Mississippi and Alabama were unified at that point. Now, what happened was this actually presented a problem for people in Natchez. Natchez was an inland port on the Mississippi River. Mobile sits on a bay that borders the Gulf of Mexico. A whole lot easier to get in ships and commodities to Mobile than it is to Natchez. Mobile started growing in population, and when Mobile finally started growing in population, with that they started getting more representation. Now, Natchez wanted to control the Mississippi Territory. People in Mobile said, I don't feel like listening to y'all. All of a sudden, Mobile growing more in population, they started controlling it. People in Natchez were like, we were here first. You ain't going to tell us what to do. That led to a point of contention. Pretty much the same way it happened in Florida, which is between Pensacola and St. Augustine. So that led to Alabama becoming its own territory, and 2 years after Mississippi statehood becoming a state itself. That and Mississippi at the time in 1817, when it became a state, was the largest state in the Union at that time until it was cut in half and Alabama was cut off. Kind of plays hand in hand like today. People in Jackson don't like us out here on the coast. It happens, it is what it is. But that's how Mississippi got her present borders. That's what led to Mississippi going from a territory in dispute to growing to what she became in 1817 and later 1819. I hope you've enjoyed this series on the Mississippi Territory. Eventually, I'm going to do a series on the coast down here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast from 1699 until the Revolutionary War. Thank you for watching.